Hi dear friends, this is Hashemi speaking. My topic of discussion is about the science of sociology, and I'm going to focus on the theories of Pierre Bourdieu, one of the greatest sociologists of all time, and I would like to elaborate on his theories of habitus, field, cultural capital, social capital, doxa, symbolic violence, and hysteresis. Bourdieu made a great contribution to the world of sociology by theorizing the relationship between the person, the individuals, and the structures which are considered as the different institutions, organizations, and social norms and values. In fact, transcending the dichotomous understanding from structure and agency was his great innovation, aligned with Anthony Giddens. They were very, very fundamental theories in this regard, and especially Bourdieu's theory of habitus, which is considered as the individual's cognitive and mental orientation toward things, events, and in fact the individual's schema of perception and their recognition of what is acceptable and what is not, what is permitted and what is not, is very, very instrumental in theorizing the relationship and the dialectic relationship, in fact, between the person and society. According to Bourdieu, we are not passive recipient of the norms and structures. Rather, we are carrying with ourselves a history, a biography, which has been embodied in our mind and in our physical behavior, which is called hexis. Referring to a very simple example, we can compare the way of walking of a villager, a person from very far villages, with a person who is a professor at university. Even their way of walking is different. Do you know why? In many cases, the experiences and their socialization behavior, which has been formed in the process of time, gradually have influenced their understanding and their way of behaving and interacting and manner regarding different issues and different aspects in the personal and public life. We are socialized in family, we are socialized at schools, university, and every other social arena and context, which then leads to the embodiment of the rules and regulations in our mind, consciously and unconsciously. So, according to Bourdieu, all of us carry a habitus, which in most cases can be considered as a matrix for perception, understanding, judgment, and appreciation toward different things, events, and functions. Some people's habitus might be congruent with the field in which they exist. Here I elaborate on the concept of field, social field, which was another innovative, constructive, and highly applicative term introduced by Bourdieu. Field, according to Bourdieu, is the structured relation between different positions that people occupy within a social system. Each field has its own rules, regulation, norms, standards, and capitals. We have many different types of fields. For example, the field of education, the field of policy, the field of art, and each of them are divided into different subcomponents, and they have their own rules. In field, the most important thing is autonomy. Autonomy means that every field has the structured relationship between the positions that agents hold in a system. It's not so much vulnerable to the external forces, to the external pressures, and to the external norms. For instance, you can imagine the field of education in Iran. In Iran, the field of education is not autonomous. Many different decisions made in the educational system, whether by the higher level administrators, the teachers, are influenced by political and economic factors. That's why my study indicated that most of the teachers were dissatisfied in functioning in this field. By this field, I mean the field of education in Iran. Most of them said that their political ideas play a crucial role in their position, and if their ideas and their attitudes are not congruent with the norms imposed by the field of power, they cannot improve in the system, and sometimes they are secluded and they have subordinate position in the system. So another important term regarding the theory of field, according to Bourdieu, is the hierarchization structure. The hierarchization structure is either autonomous or not. The autonomous hierarchization structure allows the field itself to determine its rules, the value of the capitals distributed in the interrelated field, and also the understanding and the analysis of the habitus which is required by the agents within that field. If the hierarchization in a social field is autonomous, it means that those in the field decide what should be done, decide what capital is the most important thing in a society, who should hold the power, and who should decide what are the markers of achievement for the agents and the people who occupy different positions within a field. In autonomous hierarchization structure, the field does not have autonomy. The level of agency of the field is very limited, as I mentioned in the example in Iran. The heteronymous hierarchization system does not allow for the people within the field to make important decisions, and most of the time they are widely influenced by the field of power. So these interventions in varieties of the fields most of the time are destructive to the creativity, to the improvement and motivation of the different people. Regarding the field of education, this principal heteronymous field of education in Iran was totally destructive to the professional identity construction of Iranian EFL teachers. I conducted with my professor a qualitative analysis, a hermeneutic phenomenological analysis, and my study indicated that there are too much hurdles for teachers to construct a narrative regarding their professional self with respect to the interventions of the field of power, mostly field of religion and political field in the affair of education, which led to the demotivation and burnout of the teachers, widely influenced the level of self-efficacy level of agency and autonomy. As I told you before, habitus is the internalized cognition, attitudes, and the internalization of the outside structures. We can consider it as an internalization of the structures in the mind. What does it mean? It means that our habitus is the result of our experience with family and with many different social structures in which we have functioned. These interactions helps us to have preconceptions, attitudes, judgments that function as schema for perception and judgment. And automatically, subconsciously, it contributes to our decisions and our functions in the society. For instance, habitus, the person whose habitus regarding the way of his clothing is informal, doesn't like formal suits. Some people's habitus regarding education is not positive. They have negative attitude toward continuing education. Where does it come from? It comes from their experience from family, school, and many different contexts. So, according to Bourdieu, people are not just passive recipient of the norms imposed by the society and superstructures, macrostructures. They are creative. They carry with themselves habitus, which is the subjectivization of the objective structures outside the context, outside the mind of the individuals as social agents. According to Bourdieu, when people enter a field, when people enter and function in a field, if their habitus, which is their schema of perception, is not congruent with the rules of the field, the effect hysteresis is formulated. For instance, you imagine a villager that has come to a great city. Many of his conceptions toward behaving politely are in contradiction to the rules and norms of the city context. This person most of the time suffers wide range of problems because unconsciously she behaves in a way that are not accepted by the norms of society. She might have gained some theoretical conscious knowledge about good behavior, standard behavior, but as her habitus is not in accordance with the norms of the city, she cannot be successful in accommodating most of her functions. Here, according to Bourdieu, we experience self-reflexivity. What is self-reflexivity? Self-reflexivity refers to the time that a person understands that what he or she does are the result of the interaction between the field and their habitus. And they gain the power to think about their behaving. Most of the time, we do not function based on our calculations. Our calculations, which is widely held, widely supported by the theorists of the interactionism, believe that most of the time we are rational thinkers, decide what to do, and we have enough freedom to decide about what function, what action to take. But according to Bourdieu, it's not that much. And we have many limitations, and habitus is one of the factors that limits our functions in society. Another important term which has been widely referred in Bourdieu's attitudes is the concept of capital.
Marx previously referred that capital, the economic capital, is the most important and crucial factor in determining the structure of the society. And the clashes among different layers and strata of society is the result of their competition for gaining money and economic wealth. According to Bourdieu, the capital cannot be limited to economic factors alone. There are many other types of wealth that cannot be understood as a kind of economic capital. One of them was cultural capital. He divided cultural capital in institutionalized capital, embodied capital, and by embodied capital he referred to our knowledge about functioning correctly, our knowledge of language, our knowledge of our learning of different international languages, our codes of behavior. Institutionalized culture capital referred to our degrees, our scientific degrees, certifications, accreditations that during our life, our membership in different groups. And objectivized culture capital are the objectified concrete cultural manifestations like different books, magazines, the articles that we have written, and the different things which are related to the field of knowledge and understanding. According to Bourdieu, this capital, which is called cultural capital, plays very, very important role in the matrix of the society. The owners of the cultural capital can turn this capital into economic capital. And gaining cultural capital is much more difficult in many instances in comparison with economic capital, because economic capital can be inherited without problems, but gaining cultural capital like knowledge, authority, cultural authority is not something that is gained easily from one generation to another generation easily. Of course, Bourdieu here in his important book, Distinction, refers to the fact that many social institutions that are considered, that are supposed or that are claimed to be impartial, in fact reproduce the biased, illegitimate structures that are in the interest of those of the higher level of societies, those of the rich and bourgeois. And the lower level people are suffering. Schools teach directly and indirectly to the students to appreciate the culture, the dominant culture of the rich and bourgeois, and disrespects the lower level people, the culture of lower level people. Very beautifully and cleverly, Bourdieu represents this attitude and indicates how it is tragic, and tries to win over and tries to indicate the mechanism of this cruelty to the lower level people. Another type of capital is social capital. According to Bourdieu, the people we know, the groups to which we belong, and our mutual relationships, the quality of our mutual relationships, are facilitators of our improvement in society for gaining good positions within a field. Another important capital is symbolic capital. Any other type of capital can be symbolic if it refers to if it represents the recognition, fame, popularity, and prestige. For instance, I can refer to the for example, Rolex watches. There are many watches that are more expensive than Rolex, but Rolex, the Rolex company has gained symbolic capital. So this mark, this brand has gained symbolic capital, and so it has prestige, it has recognition. And you know many people who are not well educated, who are not rich, but they have very, very high influence, and somehow he drew this concept, Bourdieu drew this concept from Weberian concept of charisma, and the concept of charisma can somehow be interrelated to the concept of the symbolic capital.
There are another important terms, as I told you, like symbolic violence, doxa, and the autonomous principle of hierarchization within different contexts, in a specific context that I will elaborate on them on my next presentations. Thank you very much.